An inescapable challenge for the Church today. At a particularly critical time in the history of the Church in Rome, when the imperial institutions were collapsing under the pressure of the barbarian invasions, Pope St. Gregory the Great felt it was necessary to remind the faithful. Every minute we can find Lazarus if we seek him, and every day, even without seeking, we find one at our door. Now beggars besiege us, imploring alms. Later they will be our advocates. Therefore, do not waste the opportunity of doing works of mercy. Do not store unused the good things that you possess. Gregory courageously denounced contemporary forms of prejudice against the poor, including the belief that they were responsible for their plight. Whenever you see the poor doing something reprehensible, do not despise or discredit them, for the fire of poverty is perhaps purifying their sinful actions, however slight they may be. Not infrequently, our prosperity can make us blind to the needs of others. It even makes us think that our happiness and fulfillment depend on ourselves alone, apart from others. In such cases, the poor can act as silent teachers for us, making us conscious of our presumption and instilling within us a rightful spirit of humility. While it is true that the rich care for the poor, the opposite is no less true. This is a remarkable fact confirmed by the entire Christian tradition. Lives can be actually turned around by the realization that the poor have much to teach us about the gospel and its demands. By their silent witness, they make us confront the precariousness of our existence. The elderly, for example, by their physical frailty, remind us of our own fragility, even as we attempt to conceal it behind our apparent prosperity and outward appearance. The poor, too, remind us of how baseless is the attitude of aggressive arrogance with which we frequently confront life's difficulties. They remind us how uncertain and empty our seemingly safe and secure lives may be. Here again, St. Gregory the Great has much to tell us. Let no one consider himself secure, saying, I do not steal from others, but simply enjoy what is rightfully mine. The rich man was not punished because he took what belonged to others, but because, while possessing such great riches, he had become impoverished within. This was indeed the reason for his condemnation to hell. In his prosperity he preserved no sense of justice. The wealth he had received made him proud and caused him to lose all sense of compassion. For us Christians, the problem of the poor leads to the very heart of our faith. St. John Paul II taught that the preferential option for the poor, namely the Church's love for the poor, is essential for her and a part of her constant tradition, and impels her to give attention to a world in which poverty is threatening to assume massive proportions in spite of technological and economic progress. For Christians, the poor are not a sociological category, but the very flesh of Christ. It is not enough to profess the doctrine of God's incarnation in general terms. To enter truly into this great mystery, we need to understand clearly that the Lord took on a flesh that hungers and thirsts and experiences infirmity and imprisonment. A poor church for the poor begins by reaching out to the flesh of Christ. If we reach out to the flesh of Christ, we begin to understand something, to understand what this poverty, the Lord's poverty, actually is. And this is far from easy. By her very nature, the Church is in solidarity with the poor, the excluded, the marginalized, and all those considered the outcasts of society. The poor are at the heart of the Church, because our faith in Christ, who became poor and was always close to the poor and the outcast, is the basis of our concern for the integral development of society's most neglected members. In our hearts, we encounter the need to heed this plea, born of the liberating action of grace within each of us. And so, it is not a matter of a mission reserved only to a few. At times, the Christian movements or groups have arisen which show little or no interest in the common good of society, and in particular the protection and advancement of its most vulnerable and disadvantaged members. Yet we must never forget that religion, especially the Christian religion, cannot be limited to the private sphere, as if believers had no business making their voice heard with regard to problems affecting civil society and issues of concern to its members. Indeed, any church community, if it thinks it can comfortably go its own way without creative concern and effective cooperation in helping the poor to live with dignity and reaching out to everyone, will also risk breaking down. However much it may talk about social issues or criticize governments, it will easily drift into spiritual worldliness, camouflaged by religious practices, unproductive meetings, and empty talk. Nor is the question merely of providing for welfare assistance and working to ensure social justice. Christians should also be aware of another form of inconsistency in the way that they treat the poor. In reality, the worst discrimination which the poor suffer is the lack of spiritual care. Our preferential option for the poor must mainly translate into a privileged and preferential religious care. Yet this spiritual attentiveness to the poor is called into question, even among Christians, by certain prejudices arising from the fact that we find it easier to turn a blind eye to the poor. There are those who say our task is to pray and teach sound doctrine. Separating this religious aspect from integral development, they even say that it is the government's job to care for them, or that it would be better not to lift them out of their poverty, but simply teach them to work. At times, pseudo-scientific data are also invoked to support the claim that a free market economy will automatically solve the problem of poverty, or even that we should opt for pastoral work with the so-called elite, since rather than wasting time on the poor, we better to care for the rich, the influential, and professionals, so that with their help, real solutions can be found, and the church can feel protected. It is easy to perceive the worldliness behind these positions, which would lead us to view reality through superficial lenses, lacking any light from above, and to cultivate relationships that bring us security and a position of privilege. Almsgiving today. I'd like to close by saying something about almsgiving, which nowadays is not looked upon favorably even among believers. Not only is it rarely practiced, but it is even at times disparaged. Let me state once again, the most important way to help the disadvantaged is to assist them in finding a good job, so that they can lead a more dignified life by developing their abilities and contributing their fair share. In this sense, lack of work means far more than simply not having a steady source of income. Work is also this, but is much, much more. By working, we become a fuller person. Our humanity flourishes. Young people become adults only by working. The Church's social doctrine has always seen human work as a participation in God's work of creation that continues every day, also thanks to the hands, mind, and heart of the workers. On the other hand, where this is not possible, we cannot risk abandoning others to the fate of lacking the necessities for a dignified life. Consequently, almsgiving remains, for the time being, a necessary means of contact, encounter, and empathy with those less fortunate. Those inspired by true charity know full well that almsgiving does not absolve the competent authorities of their responsibilities, eliminate the duty of government institutions to care for the poor, or detract from rightful efforts to ensure justice. Almsgiving at least offers us a chance to halt before the poor, to look into their eyes, to touch them, and to share something of ourselves with them. In any event, almsgiving, however modest, brings a touch of pietas into a society otherwise marked by the frenetic pursuit of personal gain. In the words of the book of Proverbs, those who are generous are blessed, for they share their bread with the poor. Both the Old and New Testaments contain veritable hymns in praise of almsgiving. Be patient with somebody in humble circumstances. Do not keep him waiting for your alms. Store up almsgiving in your treasury, and it will rescue you from every disaster. Jesus himself adds, sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. St. John Chrysostom is known for saying, almsgiving is the wing of prayer. If you do not provide your prayer with wings, it will hardly fly. In the same vein, St. Gregory of Nazianzus concluded one of his celebrated orations with these words: "If you think that I have something to say, servants of Christ, his brethren and co-heirs, let us visit Christ whenever we may. Let us care for him, feed him, clothe him, welcome him, honor him, not only at a meal, as some have done, or by anointing him, as Mary did, or only by lending him a tomb, like Joseph of Arimathea, or by arranging for his burial, like Nicodemus, who loved Christ half-heartedly, or by giving him gold, frankincense, and myrrh, like the Magi before all these others. The Lord of all asks for mercy, not sacrifice. Let's then show him mercy in the persons of the poor and those who today are lying on the ground, so that when we come to leave this world, they may receive us into everlasting dwelling places." Our love and deepest convictions need to be continually cultivated, and we do so through our concrete actions. Remaining in the realm of ideas and theories while failing to give them expression through frequent and practical acts of charity will eventually cause even our most cherished hopes and aspirations to weaken and fade away. For this reason, we Christians must not abandon almsgiving. It can be done in different ways, and surely more effectively, but it must continue to be done. It is always better to at least do something rather than nothing. Whatever form it may take, almsgiving will touch and soften our hardened hearts. It will not solve the problem of world poverty, yet it must still be carried out with intelligence, diligence, and social responsibility. For our part, we need to give alms as a way of reaching out and touching the suffering flesh of the poor. Christian love breaks down every barrier, brings close those who were distant, unites strangers, and reconciles enemies. It spans chasms that are humanly impossible to bridge, and it penetrates to the most hidden crevices of society. By its very nature, Christian love is prophetic. It works miracles and knows no limits. It makes what was apparently impossible happen. Love is above all a way of looking at life and a way of living it. A church that sets no limits to love, that knows no enemies to fight but only men and women to love, is the church that the world needs today. Through your work, your efforts to change unjust social structures, or your simple, heartfelt gesture of closeness and support, the poor will come to realize that Jesus' words are addressed personally to each of them. "I have loved you." Given in Rome, at St. Peter's, on October 4th, the memorial of St. Francis of Assisi, in the year 2025, the first of my pontificate. Leo XIV.